One of the challenges you probably face if you use cameras such as the Canon R5 or Fujifilm X-H2S is dealing with those huge file sizes. You easily run out of space in your SD cards, the file transfers take very long, and let's be honest, spending $190 on a 128GB V90 SD card is also not exactly affordable. So let's have a look at those cards here. CFexpress Type B cards. I use those here from Pergear and I already used them for around half a year, so this is already more like a long-term experience-based review and not just some quick thoughts about cards like that. I used 3 of those cards altogether. The first 2 were the 1TB Pro cards, which I paid completely by myself, no discount or anything. I ordered them from their website, but this third card here, the 1TB Ultra card, I got that for free, but this video is not sponsored. I don't receive any money for it. And if you want to know how I store my files in the long term, definitely keep watching till the end, because there I also show you the system that I use for that. Trying out a new cafe today. Looks good. Americano. Roma films himself all the time now with small cameras, the ZV-E10, but because the camera is so small, there's no iris etc. in there, he always has to use a, how can you see that? Here, a tripod to film himself. That is actually the reason why even for vlogging and filming yourself it makes more sense to have big cameras. And you have IBIS in there, you don't always need a tripod to film everything. So let's start with the topic about these CFexpress Type B cards that I find most important, and that are the transfer speeds. And I have a little story to it. A few weeks ago, Roma, the friend that you just saw, gave me his A7 IV for a few days to test it against the R6 Mark II. And when I came back home after testing it and I transferred all the files, I was like, why does it take so long? And then I noticed that the SD card that he used was a V30 SD card, and I didn't use these cards for years. I still had a V90 64GB card at home, so I gave it to him. And a few days later, I received a message from him with something like, man, these cards are so good, it makes such a big difference. So those cards are not just important to write larger files in your camera to the card, but they are also a big improvement to your workflow, because it doesn't take a long time anymore to transfer all those files. So even V90 cards are already a lot faster, but CFexpress cards are even faster than that. And to give you an example here, V90 basically means that you have a sustained write speed of at least 90 megabyte per second, but many of those cards even claim up to 300 megabyte per second. When we look at this Pergear card here, for example, 1TB Ultra, maximum read speed is 1600 megabyte per second, not megabit, and sustained write is 1300 megabyte per second. So it can write really big files on the card. For example, with a Canon R5 8K RAW, I tested that. Perfectly doable, no breakups, no problems or anything. But what I like even more is 1600 megabyte or up to 1600 megabyte of read speed when you're on the computer at home. The files are really copied in no time, so I can directly start editing when I come home. I don't have to wait. But the speeds are not exactly the same on all cards. It depends on the manufacturer, of course, and also on the space that you have on the card. Like here on the 1TB, you have a lot of speed because it can write more sectors at the same time. That's at least my understanding. But for example, when you take the Pergear 512GB Ultra card, then you can only write up to 700 megabyte per second. Only. It's still very, very fast, so you will most likely be fine with that. And those cards are actually a lot cheaper as well. Price plays also a role, and that's what we will come to in a minute. So let's talk about the pricing of CFexpress Type B cards. And you probably heard before that these cards should be super expensive, but I don't agree with that, because the price per gigabyte is actually pretty good. And I made a list here from the Pergear cards. The 2TB Ultra Pergear card costs $540, which sounds expensive, I know, but it's 2 terabytes. Then 1TB, the cards that I have, is $360 per card. Which again, it's not like super cheap, but considering that you get 1 terabyte and insane speeds, it's actually quite affordable. And now this one is important, 512 gigabytes, $83, and that's the same price that you pay for a 120 gigabyte, 128 gigabyte Sony V90 SD cards. So here you get about 4 times the amount of storage in this card for the same price, and they are faster. So if you have a CFexpress Type B reader and you want to get a Sony 128 gigabyte V90 card, I would rather get a Pergear CFexpress card here for that price. Then you also have cheaper cards there, 256 gigabyte, that is $125, it's already quite affordable, and 128 gigabyte is $98, which also many SD cards cost, but with 64 gigabytes. So with 128 gigabytes you get twice the storage. Of course, there are even cheaper SD cards, maybe you're looking for something around $20 or so, but then again you only get the V30 cards and they are a lot slower and usually only with 64 gigabytes. That's why I think that if your camera has a CFexpress Type B card slot, then I would rather go for CFexpress Type B, because you get more storage for the same price, or you pay a bit more but you also get an insane amount of more storage and you have those faster speeds. So overall, I think when it comes to pricing, you definitely get more value with the CFexpress Type B cards. DaVinci Resolve on the iPad Pro.
iPad mini.
iPad mini, yeah. I actually edited 8K from the Canon R5 on the iPad mini. I would not suggest it, the screen is definitely too small to edit videos, but you can edit 8K footage on it. Let's also talk about durability of these cards, and I read at least a lot on the internet that CFexpress Type B cards are more durable than SD cards. Now, I would say that depends on the cards. For example, the SanDisk SD cards, they are relatively cheaply made, they break easily. They are, I would say, not as durable, but I also never had any actual issues with them that I couldn't transfer files or stuff. But when I look at SD cards from Sony, for example, their V90 cards, the tough ones, they are really well made. They actually feel like one piece. So there I would rate the durability really high. And on the CFexpress cards here, they overall feel really solid as well, but I would say they don't feel as solid as the SD tough cards from Sony again, but they definitely feel more solid as the SD cards from SanDisk. But they are also a bit cheaper, obviously. But when it comes to actual performance of these cards, with this 1TB Ultra card, I did not have any issues. I tested it a few days with the Fujifilm X-H2S and a couple of times with the R5, and neither reading or writing was any issues. Also no problems on the computer with those cards. On the 1TB Pro cards from Pergear, I never had any issues copying the files and everything was always there, but I had it a few times on the Fujifilm X-H2S that it wouldn't read the files, and then the camera would get stuck and I had to take the battery off and put it back in again. It happened, I think, 4 times or so, but I also read from other people that they had the same issue with the Fujifilm X-H2S. I think it was with Angelbird cards, so it could also be that it's not really an issue with the cards by themselves, but maybe it's a camera issue there. And even when that happened, all the files were there, nothing was missing or so. I could still copy everything perfectly on the computer, so it wasn't an actual issue. It was more like temporarily that I couldn't review the files then.
You know, I had the same issue with the Fuji X-T4 and the Sony TUF cards.
Really?
Yeah, I had to replace the card like 4 times. And I was thinking the issue is with the camera. Like 4 times I had to go to Sony and replace that card. I was thinking the issue is with the card, but actually it was with the camera. And it took me a while to understand that. That's why I actually sold it. Because it was giving me so many issues.
Okay, but that's actually weird. I never had such problems with the X-T4, and I also did not have any issues with SD cards on the X-H2S. But who knows? So could be a card problem, could be a camera problem. We don't know. Let me put the camera back here. So yeah, I think overall when it comes to durability, it's either better or at least the same as SD cards. And like it is with everything, there are also a few disadvantages of CFexpress cards, but they're actually quite minor. I would say the biggest one is that not every CFexpress Type B card is compatible with every CFexpress Type B card reader, but that is mostly true for older card readers. So you should ensure that you buy a newer card reader, then you won't have that problem. Also, if you get those Pergear cards, they also sell a card reader that works perfectly with them. And the second disadvantage that some people say is that these cards are bigger than SD cards, but they are not much bigger and also not noticeably heavier, or it's not really noticeably bigger in my opinion. That's not actually an issue, and I would actually say that both disadvantages are not actually disadvantages overall, at least if you get a newer card reader. So that's my opinion about the storage in your camera. You should always go for the fastest possible. If you have it in your camera available, choose CFexpress Type B cards, but if not, then definitely go for SD cards with V90 so that you have faster transfers. It makes a huge difference. I didn't want to believe that before as well. I actually took a bit of time until I bought my first CFexpress Type B card, but I didn't regret it. But now I would say it's also time to look at how I store my files in the long term. And at first, a little tip: before I store my files, I always compress them, because especially if I shoot ProRes, for example, or even now with Canon, those 170 megabyte or megabit files, they are pretty heavy, and I know that HEVC 100 Mbits 10bit42 is enough. So to do that, I always use Apple Compressor. I have my presets there, HEVC 100 for 24p up to 30p footage, and I have a HEVC 200 preset there for 60p footage. And 100 only means 100 Mbits and 200 Mbits, and I just drag them over there over all those files. I always look which frame rate I shot in, and then I compress all of them, and then I transfer them to my NAS server, and that is what I will show you now. Yeah, that's a bit different position than usual, but this is where my NAS server stands, which I will call NAS server from now on. And the NAS server that I have is the Synology DS920 Plus, and as you can see, it has these 4 slots here. In every slot I can put a hard drive, and these hard drives, they are specialized for NAS servers. You can get them of up to, I think, 18 or maybe 20 terabytes. 18 is what I saw. Maybe you can also get them at 20. I would wonder if not. Right now I have 2 hard drives in there with altogether 25 terabytes. Should have bought a bit more from the beginning, but you know, like money, it's still not cheap. Just for that NAS server alone, I paid around 1,300 to 1,500 US dollars. So it's definitely not cheap, but considering that I have 25 terabytes in there, that actually makes a lot of sense if you do some sort of professional video production, may it be YouTube or may it be freelancing or whatever. And what I like about it is that I have this cable here, which leads directly up here to my Wi-Fi router. So when I'm here at home, I can access that with super high speed from everywhere in the house, and I can even access all of that while I'm anywhere in the world via an internet link. Now, it's definitely a bit slower then, but it still works really nice, because even if I have to wait a little bit, at least being able to access video files from everywhere in the world that I might need for certain projects. And then you also see this other device here. This is a UPS, not the packaging service, and that is basically a big battery that ensures that the server here always gets power, and it also works the other way around. It also protects it from overpowering. It might depend a bit on the area that you live in. Maybe if you never have power cuts, then you don't necessarily need it. So that's my solution to store my files in the long run. But to come back to CFexpress Type B cards, should you get them or not? I think it depends a little bit. If you're a professional of any kind, doesn't matter if content creator, freelancer or whatever, I think it makes a lot of sense to invest in those cards, because at first you can record in this codecs like ProRes and 8K formats, etc., and maybe your clients request it, maybe not now, but in the future, depends on your situation. But also with the transfer speeds, you want to be able to work fast as a freelancer and a content creator, and therefore these cards make a lot of sense. But if you're not a professional, if you're either a hobbyist or you're just starting out as a content creator, then I would say it's not necessarily to get a CFexpress Type B card, because you will only record smaller file sizes. I mean, if you can afford, then do it, you save some time then, but it's not necessarily. I would rather invest in some lenses, or if you have a bad camera right now, I would probably buy a camera that shoots 10bit42 and all of that stuff. Yeah, that's my opinion about it. I hope I could help you a little bit with the decision if you should buy a CFexpress Type B card or not. And aside from that, if you want to see what you can do with cameras such as the Fujifilm X-H2S, then check out this video here in the corner. There you see more. And if you found this video helpful, please leave me a thumbs up and consider subscribing. See you in the next video.